welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Sorry, I'm stuttering a little bit. It's kind of chilly out here. I am in Lynchburg, Virginia, recording on the spot, out on the patio of my mother and father-in-law's. And as you can hear, there is a street behind me. It's not a particularly busy street, except for when you start recording something, and then of course cars start coming down the street. It's cold, it's rainy, it is towards the end of the year as of recording here, so that's just the weather here in central Virginia. North central Virginia is where Lynchburg, Virginia is, and I'm happy to be recording the show out here, and I really wanted to record one this week. I can't record inside because all of the nieces and nephews are over, and my son is upstairs taking a nap, so it's kind of nap time around here, and I thought I'd try to squeeze in a show. On a technical note, I am recording this straight into my 16-inch M1 MacBook Pro. What's the processor? It's an M1 Pro processor, not the M1 Max processor, but the M1 Pro processor, and I'm recording into the main microphone that is underneath the left speaker grill. So anybody who has a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro of any generation that I know of, the main condenser microphone is under the left speaker grill. I know that MacBook Pros and MacBooks and MacBook Airs have several microphones around the chassis of the laptop, but the main microphone, if you wanted to record audio in the best quality possible, the main microphone is under the left speaker grill, and that's where I am talking into. I am maybe 5 or 6 inches away from the grill here, and it should sound pretty nice. I really want to record the show this week because there's something I've been meaning to talk about, a little bit of gear that I bought within the past couple weeks as of recording that I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on after owning it for a couple weeks. That is the ROG Ally, the Z1 Extreme Edition. Not the less powerful Z1 edition, but I have the ROG Ally. People keep calling it the ROG Ally. And it's one of those things like ASUS, how you want to pronounce things. The ROG Ally, I say ROG Ally because ROG stands for Republic of Gamers. It's ASUS's line of gamery things like Razer, this and that, and Alienware and whatever. So ASUS has their line of gamer gear called ROG, Republic of Gamers. Matter of fact, I still have my 14-inch Zephyrus G14, my ROG Zephyrus G14 with the RTX 3060 inside. The new G14s go all the way up to an RTX 4090, like 125 watt RTX 4090, which is just insane, and I'm so tempted, but they are ridiculously expensive for the 4090 version of it, of course. I'm not looking to spend $3,000 on a laptop. I just bought a baller laptop with an RTX 4080 in it, a 17-inch laptop, which has gotten better, by the way, as I'm distracted and going down these tangents. I always blank on the name of it. It's my 17-inch Gigabyte Aorus 17H. That's right. I almost had to hit pause and remember the name of it. My Gigabyte Aorus 17H. If you listen to past podcasts, you hear me complaining a little bit about some of the usability of it all. The hardware is amazing. The cooling's amazing. The screen's amazing. But some of the little ergonomics of it just kind of made me scratch my head. Like, why wouldn't you include, an SD card reader, for instance? Why, in the backlight keyboard, which is otherwise an amazing keyboard and the RGB looks amazing, why would you not have the function keys backlit? It's insane. Oh, you want to turn up the volume or turn down the volume? That's not backlit. You can't see. If you're in the dark, you have to bring out a flashlight to see which, is F8 and F9. That's what the volume up and down is. I guess by this point I've kind of memorized it, but still it's one of those design decisions of the Gigabyte Aorus 17H, otherwise awesome laptop. Like, why would you design the backlit keyboard and then not backlight the function keys? It's utterly ridiculous. But anyways, I do have the ROG Ally, the Z1 Extreme Edition, and I do want to give my thoughts on that. I know that this first segment, I can talk about it this first segment. There's something else I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about Jack. my very stupid cat, and I thought I'd spend the first segment talking about Jack, but I'll save that for a later segment. I want to just dive right into the ROG Ally that I bought a few weeks ago. It wasn't on a whim, but I had this I knew I was on a collision course with the ROG Ally. It came out as a recording, 6 or 7 months ago. It was a competitor to the Steam Deck, a competitor to the Lenovo Legion that I think has come out after the ROG Ally. So the gaming PC handheld space has been heating up, and the first kind of real actual competition to the Steam Deck was the ROG Ally. And you may be wondering, those of you who are more kind of tuned into this handheld gaming PC industry, well, what about the One X player and what about all these different ones? Those are very expensive. Those are around $1,100, $1,200. The ROG Ally at launch was $700. Now it's down to like $600 for the Z1 Extreme Edition and $400 for the Z1 Edition. The price is competitive to the Steam Deck. So some of the only competition to the Steam Deck for a while there was Steam Deck and the ROG Ally as in terms of price. The ROG Ally Z1 Extreme launched at like $700. It was $100 or so more expensive than even the most expensive Steam Deck, but it was still comparatively priced, and the ROG Ally is much more powerful than the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck, what it has going for it is that the Steam Deck is made by Valve, and it runs perfectly on SteamOS, and it's just optimized. Games are optimized. Developers optimize games to run on the Steam Deck, which is technically lower end hardware than the ROG Ally, but it's when a game's optimized to run perfectly on a given set of hardware, it was a better for a lot of people. It was a better prospect. It was a better purchase prospect to know that you'd have a Steam Deck with all the support in the world from Valve. It's a very fleshed out, well thought out piece of hardware. Now it's got an OLED screen, and the games are optimized to run on it. Whereas the ROG Ally it still is, in my opinion, more for tinkerers, people who are okay with having Windows 10 Home or Windows 11 Pro, any version of Windows they want on this gaming handheld, and that's what I wanted. And that's one reason why I knew I was on a collision course with it. I want to keep talking about the ROG Ally and my experience with it coming up in the next segment. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio, recording from Lynchburg, Virginia, into my MacBook Pro today. So more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. GeekTherapyRadio.com. I have redesigned the website just to keep it simpler. When you go to GeekTherapyRadio.com, the very first thing you see are the podcasts. I figure if this is a radio show and a podcast, the very first thing people should have access to when they visit the website for a radio show or podcast is the podcasts, is the audio for the podcast website you're visiting. So if you go to geektherapyradio.com, you just see a playlist of the most in order. It depends on how you set the order of it, but by default it's from newest to oldest. So you'll see, half dozen or so of the latest shows right there, ready to go, ready to play, which, by the way, on the website, I enable downloading. Maybe other podcasts may not have that feature or disable that feature, but if you go to geektherapyradio.com, and not only can you just stream the latest podcasts, but you can hit the download button and download it as an MP3 or whatever straight to your hard drive that you can then load into your phone or load into if you're still using an iPod or whatever your listening device is. If you want to listen offline, basically, if you don't pre-download podcasts through your podcast app, if you go to geektherapyradio.com, you can just download the physical files of each podcast to listen offline whenever you want. So anyways, that's a plug. geektherapyradio.com, and also all the social media, Geek Therapy Radio Podcast, wherever you search it. Put it into Google, it'll come up. Put it into Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker. You can ask your smart device to play the Geek Therapy Radio Podcast. Just Geek Therapy Radio, Geek Therapy Radio Podcast. type in one of those things and you'll see me. Red, white, and black color scheme is always what you want to be looking for. Although at this point, humble brag, if you type in Geek Therapy or Geek Therapy Rad or whatever, I at this point I should come up ranked one or two at least on SEO and search engine optimization. So just if you're curious, if you're driving around listening to the radio, type in Geek Therapy Radio into Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever you want to use, and that's the plugs. So I was talking about the ROG Ally. I have owned the ROG Ally for a few weeks, and I knew I was on a collision course with it as a geek. I actually had been perusing the Steam Deck because for a while I haven't checked as of recording. I don't know what the status is currently on this on refurbished Steam Decks, but I thought, hey, $300 I could get a refurbished Steam Deck and upgrade the M.2 SSD in there and be off to the races and whatever for not a whole ton of money compared to like a $1,200 gaming handheld. That was just out of the question. But I was watching the ROG Ally. I was waiting for the growing pains to kind of ease a little bit. Owners were complaining of the SD card reader getting so hot that it would damage the micro SD card. I have not experienced that. By the way, that phenomenon with the SD card readers really heating up your micro SD cards and your SD card. No one's using an SD card. You use an SD card with a micro SD card converter in it. Unless you're a photographer and you're using, or videographer and you're using those massive SD cards, whatever. Most people use micro SD. And that phenomenon of the micro SD card reader becoming very hot was not isolated to the ROG Ally. It's just when you have the smaller the form factor of whatever device you're using, naturally heat is an issue. So when you're trying to disperse all the heat from the processor and the APU, running the graphics and the processing, the general processing, and you've got a micro SD card reader and this and that, a very fast M.2 NVMe solid state drive in there, heat's an issue. And the micro SD card reader getting hot, again, was not isolated to the ROG Ally. Any device with a micro SD card reader can get very warm, if not burning to the touch. It gets hot in laptops that I have. It gets hot in GPD products that I have. Micro SD cards are very fast nowadays. UHS 2 and even UHS 1, like micro SD cards can read and write at over 100 megabytes per second now. And anytime you're talking about those kind of blistering read and write speeds, you're talking about heat. You're talking about current being supplied to these solid state storage, and that heat's going to need to be dissipated somehow. You have M.2 NVMe SSDs now that, well, for a while, that need heat sinks. Some of them even have fans built into it. If you're building a rig and you're getting an NVMe SSD that can now read up to 12 gigabytes read and write per second, which is crazy, like Gen 4, Gen 5, whatever solid state drives, they need heat sinks. Your storage now, your solid state storage now needs heat sinks. So it's not uncommon for micro SDs to get hot, for NVMe SSDs to get hot. It's just a thing now. So ROG was having a particular problem with the micro SD slot getting kind of so hot that it would damage the reader, or damage the actual micro SD you have in there. I haven't experienced any damage. It does get hot. And again, any micro SD card reader that I've used in the current generation they get hot. So ROG seems to have come out with firmware patches and things since release to address that issue. I have certainly not encountered the issue to where it's been damaging to any of the micro SD cards I've used. So that's been sussed out. The user interface, but apparently, like the day before or day after I bought mine, they issued a patch, a new firmware update, new software update that made the crate, Armory crate, is kind of ASUS's front end for loading games and adjusting system parameters like fan speed and how much you're setting the TDP of the chipset and all that. So Armory crate got a lot better apparently. I never tried the old Armory Crate. I have used a version of Armory Crate on my laptop, on my Zephyrus G14, and it was good for adjusting how much wattage I wanted to send to the processor, how much wattage I wanted to send to the GPU, and that's where you set your profiles for like efficiency or performance or turbo or gaming or content creation, whatever. You do all that through Armory Crate, and it works well. I've never really had a problem with Armory Crate being too buggy for me using it on the ASUS G14, and I haven't on the ROG Ally. I hadn't used the old version of Armory Crate that people were kind of complaining about. That was always the thing. That was one of the reasons why I was on the fence about the ROG Ally. Is the consensus up until when I bought mine was that it's really powerful gaming handheld, but there's just some kind of software bugs, and it's not as fleshed out, as easy to use as. Sorry, I'm waiting for these cars to go by. It's not as easy to use as the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck had been out for a while before that, has all the support from Steam. It's a really buttery smooth experience. Games are optimized for it from Steam itself. And the ROG Ally was more of it is more powerful, but it was more of a tinker. And it was like, hey, if you're comfortable using Windows 11 on a touch screen, then you should be fine with Ally, because it's going to boot into Windows. Then you're going to have to tap Steam unless you have Steam open on boot with this car pulling up? I think BJ just pulled up. I'm recording the show actively during a family reunion. So anyways, the ROG, it got better. It was more for tinkerers because it was a true Windows gaming handheld, and that's how I used it, and that didn't scare me away from it. It's like that, that's kind of what I want. I want to be able to manipulate anything to my heart's desire. I'm one of those crazy people personally that has no interest in installing SteamOS on any of my devices, because I want. One of the reasons I got the ROG Ally, and this is getting into the kind of the user experience of it all, is that I wanted something that I could be sitting on the couch gaming, and then need to do something for work, and then just bring the same device upstairs and plug one USB or Thunderbolt 4 cable into it, and boom, it's attached to all my peripherals, it's attached to all my external hard drives, it's attached to my external monitors, and I can do actual real work with it. And that it has performed that function in spades. I can see we're coming up to the end of the segment here. I want to get third segment is the longest segment, so I'll kind of dive into the user experience and the purchasing experience of it all when we come back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm talking about the ROG Ally and my experience with it. Enjoy the break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator. I can hear behind me Uncle BJ has rolled up on this rainy, cool day, so I might get a word from him, although he looks like he's on the cell phone. Y'all want to hear from Uncle BJ if he gets off the phone in time? We'll see. He's walking, he's eyeballing me. We'll see if I get him on the show. He's certainly not obligated. So I'm going to jump right back into... by the way, you're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. GeekTherapyRadio.com for more information, or Geek Therapy Radio on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, even though I got to do more TikToks. I always say that. Every show, I'm like, I got to do more TikToks. But Geek Therapy Radio is everywhere. So I was talking about the ROG Ally, and now I'm going to use this third segment, at least, to talk about the user experience, and I will start with why I bought it. In the past couple segments, you've heard me mention that I've been on a collision course with the ROG Ally since its release. But the main obstacle, the main reason why I never pulled the trigger on it, wasn't because of any sort of user experience bugs they were trying to work out with it, or the SD card reader getting too hot. It wasn't any of that. It was that it was $700. It was that it was expensive. I mean, it was like mid-range between the cheapest and most expensive x86 gaming handheld. So on the more expensive side, you had things like the One X Player Pro or whatever from these various kind of niche manufacturers, and those devices were $1,100, $1,200. You could spend up to like $1,500 on these gaming handhelds, and that certainly wasn't happening. That it wasn't worth it in my mind. I'm no. I've got enough for $1,500. I mean, you can buy a baller gaming laptop for $1,500. You can get a gaming laptop with an RTX 4070 at least for $1,500. Certainly, even less than that actually. So I certainly wasn't in the market for that. $700 at launch for the ROG Ally was still way too expensive. It's way too expensive for what would amount to a toy in my mind. Because I still had a couple of GPD products. I got the GPD WinMax 2 with the 6800U processor in that, and it's been working great. And I was like, I've got a hybrid handheld. Like that GPD WinMax 2 is a laptop basically. It's a 10.2-inch laptop that does have built-in Xbox-style controls, but I didn't have a dedicated just x86 Windows gaming PC handheld. Yet I had the Logitech G Cloud, which I still have. Still love the G Cloud. The G Cloud is honestly flabbergastingly good. It's just slightly too expensive at $300. Usually it's $350. Sometimes it comes down to $300. It's way too expensive. My advice is is in terms of the Logitech G Cloud. I've heard others mention this. Retro Game Core, who has an awesome YouTube channel, and I got to get him on the show, hopefully, mention this about the Logitech G Cloud, that as good as it is, there's no way that any tech YouTuber, any tech reviewer could recommend the G Cloud at $300. That it's a fantastic gaming Android handheld, absolutely superb, the best you've ever felt. Like it's ridiculous how slept on the G Cloud is, but the reason why it's slept on is because it's slightly too expensive. $250 would be a better price point. $200 would be absolutely perfect. The reason why it's kind of slept on and people can't recommend it for $300, certainly not $350, is that for $350 you can get a freaking Steam Deck. And the hardware in the G Cloud is a little older. It's a Snapdragon like 720G or whatever. It's dated hardware. It's super efficient. The battery life lasts for days, it seems like. It just doesn't die. The battery life is insane, and it can run everything up to a lot of PS2 titles. I like to play Gran Turismo 4 on the Logitech G Cloud, but still, for $300, it's just too expensive to recommend to others. So the way to go, if you're interested in a G Cloud, this is what Retro Game Core said, and is what I totally agree with, is go on eBay. If you want a G Cloud for around $200, which is a perfect price point for a G Cloud, go on eBay. No buyer's remorse. I bought the G Cloud kind of on a whim on Amazon because it was $300, and it was like, oh, you just do a couple monthly payments of $50 or whatever. It's like, you know what? Okay, I'll give it a shot. No remorse. My son uses it all the time. It's a godsend. It is just an amazing Android gaming device. It's almost perfect, other than the hardware is slightly outdated technically, but it's still great for running retro Arch and gaming up to PS2 titles. But anyways, back to the ROG Ally. I was on a collision course with it, and what sealed the deal was that one day I said, you know what, I'm going to start cruising around Best Buy and whatnot and see what the open box scene is for a Z1 Extreme, because I know the price had come down. The Z1 Extreme had come down from $700 to $600, which is awesome. And I said, okay, if it's $600 now, brand new, what is the open box? And I was able to get one open box for like $480, which was only $80 more expensive than a brand new Z1 model that is way less powerful. I cannot recommend the Z1 model to anybody for even $400. It's just not. When you can bet for $100 extra, you can get the Z1 Extreme model, which is infinitely more powerful, like night and day, incomparably more powerful. You're gonna have a much better experience with an ROG Ally Z1 Extreme for $100 extra versus ROG Ally Z1. And saving $100 to have a terrible gaming experience, it's a no-brainer. So when the ROG Ally came down to $600 brand new, and I started cruising around the open box items at Best Buy, and I saw an ROG Ally Z1 Extreme for $480. Yeah, I picked one up, and I saved the receipt because I was like, you know what, I might not like this thing. I don't know how this might fit in with my kind of current ecosystem of electronics and computers and everything. So I'm going to save the receipt. I got a decent little bonus at work. I had a lot of points on my credit card, a lot of like cashback rewards. So I was like, you know what, I'll pull the trigger on this and I'll save the receipt. Day one, I was like, I can crumple up this receipt and throw it away. I didn't because it could have some sort of issue. But day one using it, I was like, this thing is awesome. This thing, day one, I didn't have any buyer's remorse with it. And the more time I spent with it, the more I did some upgrades. I upgraded the NVMe to a 2 terabyte 2230 NVMe, and I might even upgrade to a 4 terabyte 2280. By the way, all you ROG Ally owners or people who are interested in the ROG Ally, you might read that it only accepts a 2230 sized NVMe, which you can get up to 2 terabytes, which is honestly plenty. But you can also go up to 8 terabytes because there is an adapter. The engineers of the ROG Ally left enough space in there that you can use an L adapter to adapt from the 2230 to a full 2280. Perfectly. So you can get, if you wanted to be just insane and dumb, I'll just say, and get an 8 terabyte NVMe 2280 NVMe SSD for your Ally, you could totally do that. You could totally spend, I don't know, like 8 terabyte NVMe SSD is probably, gosh, $400 or $500 at least, if not more than that. It's starting to rain here, as you can hear. We're doing some ASMR Geek Therapy Radio here in Lynchburg, Virginia. But anyways, ROG Ally, you can certainly do. You can use an adapter. It's like $12 on Amazon to adapt to the 2230 to accept 2280 NVMe SSD in there. I stay with the 2230. It's a 2 terabyte 2230, and I completely wiped. I did a fresh install of Windows 11 Pro. ROG Ally comes with Windows 11 Home. I got rid of the 2230 SSD that came in there, and I put in a fresh 2 terabyte 2230 and did a fresh install of Windows 11 Pro, which was a very straightforward process. ROG, the Ally has like a cloud-based restoration. You go in the BIOS, and you can restore Windows 11 Home through the BIOS. It's a nightmare. It's a freaking nightmare to even attempt it. Like, I couldn't do it, and I just reading all over Reddit and around the internet. Apparently, it's super duper wonky. It's super duper broken, and just don't do it. So I popped in the 2 terabyte 2230, did a fresh install of Windows 11 Home, got a CD key from where's the place that ETA Prime recommends? Windows 11 Pro license for $22, I think, after the little promo code discount. Fresh install Windows 11 Pro, downloaded all of the ROG software from ASUS itself, the Armory Crate, everything. It runs a freaking dream, and just using it to game and play my game right now, and it's a perfect for the ROG Ally, is Teardown. Any Teardown players out there? Oh, Teardown's awesome, and it runs so good on the ROG Ally. It runs great on Steam Deck also, as it happens. But I've been using it to game, and I've been using it to do real work. We're at the end of the third segment here. I'm going to tell you in the fourth segment what it's like to use day to day as both a gaming system and an actual workstation for doing real work, because it excels at both. There's slight limitations to the workstation, but I'll get into that in the fourth segment. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I think my son might be awake now. I'm recording this in Lynchburg, Virginia. At the moment, it is very cold and very rainy, and I am relegated out to the patio, the screened-in patio, so I'm dry, but I am cold. I'm bundled up. It's in the 40s right now, which is, some of you listening, 40s. 40s is chilly. I don't care where you're from. Like, 40s is not sit outside and record a podcast weather because it's rainy. It's a rainy 40. It's not a sunny out in the sun 40. It's a rainy 40 degrees. Anyways, I'm enjoying it. Maybe you'll hear the raindrops around me as I'm recording this kind of ASMR style, as it's turning out to be. Episode of Geek Therapy Radio, recording straight into my M1 MacBook Pro, just the built-in microphone, the best built-in microphone in the entire MacBook Pro is underneath the left speaker grill. Whether you're using a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, whatever, the good microphone is the good main microphone is underneath the left speaker grill. So it should sound pretty good as I'm recording here. I've been talking about the ROG Ally, that I purchased an ROG Ally Z1 Extreme model from Best Buy, open box, $480, which is why the price came down enough for me to justify giving it a shot. And I've been telling you that in the previous segments, that I did a clean install of Windows 11 Pro to a fresh 2 terabyte 2230 NVMe SSD, and it has been running an absolute dream for handheld gaming. It's very powerful. The Z1 Extreme is some of you might be wondering this, because I certainly did. What's the difference between a Z1 Extreme and a normal 7840U, an AMD Ryzen 7840U? And there's really not the only difference that I can even determine. I think there's one. I'm not sure. I think there's an instruction set that almost nobody uses in their CPU that is disabled on the Extreme or enabled on the Extreme versus the 7840U where it's enabled or disabled. It's vice versa, whatever. Nobody listening to this is probably ever going to use that instruction set. I can't remember what the instruction set is. It's not AVX 512, because AVX 512 absolutely freaking works on the Z1 Extreme and the 7840U. It's amazing. That enables things like PS3 emulation to be much faster and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely has AVX 512 instruction set across 7840U and the Z1 Extreme, but they're effectively the same processor. The Z1 Extreme, I think, can be TDP'd a little bit lower. Like, it's slightly more efficient. It's slightly fewer watts to slightly more watts. Like, it's not much. It can be, the TDP is slightly more efficient on a Z1 Extreme, hence the Extreme. So it's like, I'm willing to wager that it's all the same die. It's a binning issue to where they're printing out the 7840s, they're pumping out 7840s, and the 7840s that can clock a little bit, that can operate at a slightly lower TDP, therefore are slightly more efficient. They batch those as the Z1 Extremes. But the 7840U and the Z1 Extreme are effectively the same chip. It's just the Z1 Extreme is slightly more efficient, which makes it a better option for going into smaller devices like Windows gaming handhelds. So, user experience. One of the justifications for buying it, was the price had to come down, which it did, and I got it open box, $480, like I mentioned. Also, I had to be able to use this thing. This thing had to integrate into my work and play flow, and not just become a doorstop. It had to be useful, had to be functional to justify the purchase. And on the gaming front, hand over fist, it is awesome as a handheld gaming device. It's an 8-inch 1080p screen, 120 hertz refresh rate. It's insane. It looks really good. It's not OLED, but it looks absolutely freaking fantastic. The screen, the buttons, the layout, the D-pad, the triggers, the L3 or 4 triggers or whatever on the back of the panel, of the back of the device are awesome. The feel of it, the ergonomics, the buttons, perfection. The only thing that feels similar or better is the Logitech G Cloud. And seriously, that's one of the reasons why the Logitech G Cloud is so amazing, is that the ergonomics and the controllers and the feel is the best I've ever felt, and most reviewers have ever felt ever in a gaming device. But the ROG Ally feels just as good, if not maybe slightly. The reason why the ROG Ally might feel slightly, I don't want to use the word worse than the G Cloud, is that the G Cloud weighs nothing. The ROG Ally also is extremely lightweight, but if you were holding the G Cloud and the ROG Ally is light, but the G Cloud is lighter. So the G Cloud kind of wins in ergonomics and feels maybe a tiny bit, but the Ally is perfect. It's perfect. You're nitpicking over two perfect devices as far as ergonomics and the controls are in the control feel. They're two perfect devices, and you just basically nitpick. So the ROG Ally, as far as ergonomics and the gaming experience and the buttons and everything, is perfect. It's as good as it can possibly be. It's just exceptional, in my opinion, and in many others' opinion. The feel of the ROG Ally is perfect, and I was worried about that because ROG, ASUS's brand of gaming products, they like to have make things look kind of like sharp and angular and whatever. So I was worried, is the ROG Ally going to sacrifice comfort for the looks of it all? Is it going to try to have that stupid gamer look but then be super uncomfortable and have jagged edges to hold? And that's not the case. Matter of fact, the aesthetic of the ROG Ally is quite nice. I mean, to look at. It's not so extremely gamery. It's nice. I'm one of those weird people also who completely disables the RGB lighting underneath the thumbsticks. I don't care. Maybe it's just because I'm 40 years old. I don't care. And if I do have the lights on underneath the thumbsticks, I have it just set to red. Not pulsing through rainbow colors, not aura synced to other devices, not cycling and pumping and going with the beat of music, any crazy disco effect going. It's just, if I do have the light RGB going on my ROG Ally under the thumbsticks, it's just red, because my favorite color scheme is red and black. So of course, if I'm going to have an RGB light on a solid color, it's going to be red. Also helps at night to keep your eyes kind of trained for the dark. But anyways, using it as a gaming device, like I said, great. Street Fighter 6 runs awesome on it. Rocket League, no problem with Rocket League. You can set the TDP up to 35 watts. It'll burst up to over 50 watts at times. It has no problem running esports at all. I play Sniper Elite on there. It's everything I throw at it. There might be some games where you maybe go down to medium settings as opposed to ultra, but visually it's exceptional. Things run buttery smooth, 60 frames a second, 120 frames a second even for esport titles. Rocket League will run 120 frames a second all day long if you're pumping all those watts into the APU. But I do Rocket League around 10 watts, 60 frames a second, highest settings, ultra rendering, all that. It's at 1080p. It's awesome. So the gaming experience is absolutely phenomenal on ROG Ally. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, kind of difficult to play on an 8-inch screen, or 7-inch screen, just because what is it, 8 or 7 inches? ROG Ally screen is 7 inches. I think I said 7 inches earlier, and not 8 inches, but it's a 7-inch screen on the ROG Ally. And Flight Simulator 2020 looks great on it, but on a 7-inch screen, you're trying to work controls in the cockpit and different things, and it's a little bit small. The workstation side, I edit 4K video on it. Not super hardcore edits, but it can absolutely edit 4K video, even with just 16 gigabytes of RAM. I was editing a 4K project at 24 frames a second. Absolutely usable when I plugged it into my Thunderbolt 3 dock and was blowing it up to a bigger screen and everything. If I can edit video and edit podcasts and do everything I need to do workstation-wise, and then unplug it and sit on the couch and game, winner, chicken dinner. And that's what the ROG Ally is. It is just phenomenal. No buyer's remorse. It is great. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love, and you are worthy of receiving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. Thank you so much for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I appreciate it. Tell your friends if you like the show. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.